April 1943, North Atlantic. A destroyer escort detected a U-boat at 800 yards. The captain did something that made no sense. Instead of charging toward the target to drop depth charges, he reduced speed and fired 24 mortars forward. The projectiles arced ahead of the ship, splashed into the water in a circular pattern, then silence. 30 seconds later, a massive explosion shook the surface. Oil and debris rose from below. The U-boat was gone. The Hedgehog looked like someone welded a porcupine to the foredeck. 24 spigot mortars arranged in 4 rows of 6, each tube pointing forward at 45 degrees. Sailors seeing it for the first time called it the absurd projector. Senior officers questioned its value. Why fire ahead when depth charges rolled off the stern had worked since 1917? The answer changed anti-submarine warfare completely. The Hedgehog sank U-boats through a principle nobody had used before: contact detonation. The Battle of the Atlantic in 1942 was a slaughter. German U-boats sank 781 Allied ships, totaling 4 million tons. Convoy escorts hunted submarines with sonar, then attacked with depth charges. The problem was physics. Depth charges required the attacking ship to pass directly over the submarine's position. During that final approach, sonar lost contact because the ship's own hull blocked the signal. Escorts ran blind for the critical 30 seconds before weapon release. U-boat captains knew this. They changed course and depth during that blind period. Depth charge attacks succeeded 12% of the time. American and British anti-submarine forces needed a weapon that attacked forward, maintaining sonar contact throughout the engagement. They needed a weapon that told operators immediately whether they hit or missed. They needed something that did not alert every U-boat within 5 miles that an attack was happening. Depth charges announced their presence whether they hit or not, creating massive underwater explosions that warned other submarines to dive deeper or run. The Hedgehog was developed by the British Admiralty's Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development starting in 1941. The American Navy evaluated prototypes in late 1942 and immediately ordered production. The system that emerged weighed 3,500 pounds installed. 24 spigot mortars fired 65-pound projectiles. Each projectile was 2 feet long, 7 inches diameter, contained 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. Torpex was 50% more powerful than TNT pound for pound. The firing sequence was coordinated by a gyroscopic stabilizer that compensated for ship roll and pitch. When the firing button was pressed, all 24 mortars fired in 0.25 seconds, hurling projectiles 250 yards forward of the ship. The pattern formed a circle 100 feet in diameter. Flight time was 6 seconds. The projectiles entered the water nose first and sank at 23 feet per second. Each round had a contact fuse that detonated only on impact with a solid object. If the projectile hit the seafloor, it detonated. If it hit a submarine hull, it detonated. If it hit nothing, it did not detonate. This was revolutionary. Depth charges used hydrostatic fuses set to detonate at specific depths, typically 150 feet, 200 feet, or 300 feet. Whether they hit the target or not, they exploded. The explosion warned the U-boat, damaged friendly ship sonar equipment, and created turbulence that made follow-up attacks difficult. Depth charge patterns used 6 to 12 charges per attack, creating massive disturbances that persisted for minutes. The Hedgehog was silent failure. If the projectiles missed, they sank to the bottom without exploding. The attacking ship maintained perfect sonar contact, assessed the miss, corrected aim, and fired again within 90 seconds. If the projectiles hit, the U-boat exploded. 35 pounds of Torpex against the pressure hull of a submerged submarine meant catastrophic damage. One hit was sufficient to sink any U-boat in service. The crew never heard the weapon coming. Compare this to depth charge attacks. German Type 7 C U-boats had pressure hulls rated to 750 feet operational depth. Depth charges needed to detonate within 20 feet to cause hull damage. The blast effect diminished rapidly with distance. A depth charge exploding 40 feet away might damage systems, but rarely cracked the pressure hull. Hedgehog projectiles, striking the hull, delivered explosive force directly to the metal. No water cushion, no distance dissipation. Direct contact, instant destruction. American production began at the Naval Gun Factory in Washington in January 1943. By December 1943, 280 Hedgehog systems were installed on American destroyer escorts, destroyers, and Coast Guard cutters. British production added another 390 units. Total Allied deployment reached 1,050 systems by war end. Every new destroyer escort launched after March 1943 received Hedgehog as standard equipment. The tactical advantages multiplied. Hedgehog allowed attacking ships to maintain 18 knots during approach instead of accelerating to 24 knots for depth charge runs. Lower speed meant better sonar contact and more accurate targeting. The forward throw pattern meant the ship stayed behind the weapon impact point, maintaining clean sonar returns throughout the attack. If the first pattern missed, operators adjusted aim based on continuous sonar data and fired again immediately. Statistical analysis proved effectiveness. Depth charge attacks from January to June 1943 achieved submarine kills in 12% of attacks. Hedgehog attacks from July to December 1943 achieved kills in 24% of attacks. By mid-1944, Hedgehog kill rates reached 31%. The weapon doubled effectiveness within 6 months and nearly tripled it within a year. United States ship England, destroyer escort 263, May 1944. 12 days, 6 Japanese submarines detected, 6 attacked with Hedgehog, 6 sunk. No other weapon employed. This represented the single most successful anti-submarine patrol in naval history. England's captain used Hedgehog exclusively because it allowed rapid follow-up attacks, miss the first pattern, adjust, fire again in 90 seconds. The average time from initial sonar contact to submarine destruction was 8 minutes. With depth charges, the average had been 42 minutes when attacks succeeded at all. The silence was psychological warfare. U-boat crews understood depth charges. They heard the splashes, counted seconds, braced for explosions. Even when attacks missed, the noise told them they were hunted. Hedgehog attacks were different. Crews heard nothing unless they were hit. If they heard an explosion, they were dead. If they heard nothing, they did not know whether the attack missed or whether projectiles were still sinking toward them. The uncertainty was crushing. German U-boat reports from mid-1944 mention fear of the silent weapon repeatedly. German countermeasures failed. U-boats tried the standard depth charge evasion, hard turn and dive, during the blind period when sonar lost contact. Hedgehog eliminated the blind period. The attacking ship maintained contact, tracked the turn, adjusted aim, and fired. U-boats tried emergency surface to escape. Hedgehog projectiles followed them up, detonating against the hull before the submarine could level off. Standard evasion tactics became liabilities. If you are finding this analysis of American naval innovation interesting, consider subscribing. It supports the channel and makes sure you catch the next examination. United States ship Buckley, destroyer escort 51, April 1944. Detected U-boat 660, fired Hedgehog pattern, missed. Maintained contact, fired second pattern 90 seconds later, missed. Fired third pattern, 3 projectiles struck the submarine's conning tower and forward pressure hull simultaneously. U-boat 660 sank in 45 seconds. Entire engagement lasted 6 minutes from detection to destruction. The debris field contained pieces of the pressure hull showing 3 distinct impact points. Torpex had punched through steel like paper. Production numbers revealed Allied commitment. American factories produced 7,300 Hedgehog systems from 1943 to 1945. British production added 5,800. Combined output exceeded 13,000 units. Not all were installed, but reserve inventory meant every damaged system was replaced immediately. The weapon became standard equipment across both Navy's anti-submarine forces. The projectile design was elegant simplicity: 65-pound steel bomb with streamlined nose containing the contact fuse, 35 pounds of torpex in the body, tail fins for stabilization during flight. Cost per projectile was $38. Compare this to Mark 9 depth charges at $263 each. Hedgehog attacks used 24 projectiles, costing $912 total. Depth charge attacks used 8 to 14 charges, costing $2,104 to $3,682. The cheaper weapon was more effective. German submarine losses tell the story. From January to June 1943, before widespread Hedgehog deployment, Allied forces sank 63 U-boats. From January to June 1944, with Hedgehog standard equipment, Allied forces sank 97 U-boats. Surface ship attacks accounted for 62 of those kills. Hedgehog weapons were confirmed or probable in 43 cases. The weapon represented 70% of surface vessel kills. British and American doctrines diverged slightly. British forces preferred single-pattern attacks, relying on accurate initial placement. American doctrine emphasized rapid follow-up: fire, assess, fire again. The American approach produced higher kill rates because it exploited the Hedgehog's primary advantage, the ability to maintain contact and reattack immediately. Statistical analysis showed American Hedgehog attacks averaged 2.7 patterns per engagement. British attacks averaged 1.4 patterns. American kill rates exceeded British rates by 18%. The weapon evolved. The Mark 11 Hedgehog, introduced in late 1944, increased the pattern diameter to 130 feet and reduced reload time to 70 seconds. The Mark 15 Mousetrap, a simplified 8-projectile version, was installed on smaller patrol craft and submarine chasers. Over 600 mousetrap systems deployed to Pacific Theater for use against Japanese submarines, though fewer targets meant less opportunity to prove effectiveness. Japanese submarine doctrine differed from German, emphasizing fleet support rather than commerce raiding. Japanese submarines dove deeper and moved faster on the surface than U-boats. Hedgehog proved equally effective. United States ship England's 6 kills in 12 days were all against Japanese submarines using Hedgehog exclusively. Japanese submarine I-364, I-16, RO-41, RO-106, RO-108, and RO-105 all fell to Hedgehog patterns fired by England. The weapon transcended theater, proving effective against different submarine types and tactics. Post-war analysis by German submarine commanders identified Hedgehog as the weapon that made Atlantic operations impossible by late 1944. Admiral Karl Dönitz wrote in 1946 that the combination of improved sonar and forward-throwing weapons eliminated the brief blind period that had allowed U-boats to evade depth charges. When escorts could attack without losing sonar contact, submarines lost their primary defense. Soviet naval forces received 50 Hedgehog systems through Lend-Lease in 1944 and 45. They installed the weapons on destroyer escorts operating in the Baltic and Black Seas. Soviet evaluation reports praised the contact fuse design, but noted limited opportunity for use, as German submarine activity in those theaters was minimal by 1944. Post-war, Soviet forces reverse-engineered the Hedgehog and produced their own version, designated RBU-6000. French naval forces received 30 systems in 1945. Post-war, France continued production under license, installing Hedgehog on escort vessels through the 1960s. Canadian forces, operating many destroyer escorts and Atlantic convoy duty, deployed 112 Hedgehog systems and achieved kill rates matching American performance. Canadian ship HMCS Saint Laurent sank 3 U-boats with Hedgehog between March and August 1944. The weapon remained in service long after the war. American destroyer escorts carried Hedgehog through the 1950s. Some systems stayed operational into the 1970s on reserve fleet vessels. The principle was sound, the design reliable, the effectiveness proven. When modern anti-submarine rockets replaced Hedgehog in the 1980s, they used the same concept: forward throw, contact detonation, maintain sonar contact throughout engagement. Total confirmed U-boat kills attributed to Hedgehog weapons reached 47 by May 1945. Probable kills added another 31. Combined, the weapon accounted for 78 submarine destructions in 2 years of service. This represented 14% of all U-boats sunk from mid-1943 to war end, accomplished by a weapon that equipped only 30% of Allied anti-submarine vessels. The effectiveness ratio exceeded any other anti-submarine weapon in service. The absurd porcupine that looked wrong revolutionized submarine warfare through 2 innovations: forward throw, maintaining sonar contact, and contact detonation, providing instant feedback. Miss and fire again. Hit, and the submarine dies. The silence between attacks was the terror. U-boat crews never knew if the next explosion would be their last until it happened. The psychological impact matched the physical destruction. American adoption and mass production made Hedgehog decisive. British invention, American execution. 13,000 systems built, 7,000 by American factories. The industrial capacity to equip every destroyer, escort, and destroyer with a weapon that doubled kill rates changed the Battle of the Atlantic's outcome. U-boats that survived 1942 and early 1943 died in 1944 and 45 because the weapon they could not evade found them. The numbers proved it. 24% kill rate versus 12%. 31% by mid-1944. 90-second re-attack time versus impossible with depth charges. 78 U-boats sunk. The combat record confirmed it. 6 submarines in 12 days. 3 simultaneous hits punching through pressure hulls. The post-war adoption validated it. Soviet reverse engineering. French licensed production. Canadian deployment matching American effectiveness. The absurd mortar accomplished what conventional wisdom said was impossible. It sank submarines without the attacking ship passing overhead, without losing sonar contact, without announcing the attack to every enemy within 5 miles. It did this through contact detonation that made silence mean survival and sound mean death. When Hedgehog projectiles hit U-boat hulls, the underwater explosions were the last thing crew heard. When projectiles missed, the silence meant another pattern was 90 seconds away. That was American anti-submarine warfare at its most effective. Simple principle, brilliant execution, devastating results.